there was a carcinogen that got into the generic drug supply. How did that happen, and what drug was this?
So these were really widely used blood pressure pills. It started with one called valsartan. There were a couple others that were added, losartan and irbesartan, that also had this carcinogen in it. And what happened was there was a company in China that makes the active ingredient for these drugs. That company sells them to bigger drug makers who then pass them on to American patients, and they made a manufacturing change, and that change was done to save money, but in the end it actually ended up creating this side reaction that it resulted in a carcinogen being in the drugs for as long as 4 years.
So Anna, we have an FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So explain this to me. They're testing 100% of the drugs that come into this country? Is that how it works to keep me safe?
No, I think a lot of people assume that for sure. But they're actually testing less than 1% they sample at the border. And other than that, they're relying on the industry, on the drug makers themselves, to tell them that these products are safe and have passed all the tests.
Okay, so when you look at who's responsible, you tied it back to this Chinese supplier. Is it one specific Chinese supplier, one specific Chinese factory that makes the drug from start to finish, one specific company, or one specific region? I mean, we're trying to figure out who's responsible and figure out whether this was an anomaly or this is something that tends to happen on a wider basis.
So this was one company in China that kind of set off the recall. They're the ones that made the manufacturing change that resulted in the carcinogen. The company's name is Zhejiang Huahai. They make an active ingredient that they sell to other companies like Teva Pharmaceuticals that you might have heard of, had to recall the drugs because of a carcinogen. What happened was other active pharmaceutical ingredient makers in India also copied that manufacturing process. They ended up with carcinogens in their drugs as well, and then other manufacturers had to recall if they used those active ingredients at all. So, you know, it's a problem actually that the FDA is looking at to see if it goes wider, to see if other drugs are included. So it's not for sure that it's just these blood pressure pills where this has happened.
So Anna, as far as the response to this, the response to your story, one person you quoted in your story, it was a pharmacy, I believe somewhere in New Haven, Connecticut, where they were essentially taking on testing all of the drugs that come into their pharmacy, and they said something like they were rejecting something like 10% of the drugs. Is this just now up to the individual pharmacies to sort of police this?
You know, Valisure has been doing this. It is kind of unique, like you said, and they've rejected more than 10% of the drugs that come through, but there aren't other pharmacies that are really doing this on the regular. And so this is where it gets really tough for consumers because it's not, the FDA is not doing it. We're not sure that the drug makers are actually doing it in a way that's truthful, and most pharmacies aren't doing this either.